We invented immortality, but a seemingly random subset of the population is barred from the treatment for incompatibility. Well, you just figured out what incompatible meant. The serum was expensive, as far as I knew. You could sign up for a payment plan and dedicate a sizable chunk of your income towards paying it off, but if you wanted those payments to be cheap, it would take upwards of 40 years. People would kill to have the serum, let alone the money it took to buy it. Luckily, I had the means. I grew up poor, but not for long. My father told me I had a knack for manipulating people, that I could use it to take what they didn't need. I started with shell games on street corners, developing a knack for sleight of hand, and that graduated to magic tricks, which turned into a very short-lived stint on the Vegas Strip. It's not that I couldn't handle the job, but there was something about the air of vice in that city that turned me off. When I decided to change things up, my new target was life insurance. It's funny how most people I've talked to say they're not afraid of dying. Get them on the phone and mention any of the top 10 leading causes of death in people of their age group and, all of a sudden, they start rethinking their priorities. Even if they hold fast, the mere mention of their families and their futures will split open their pocketbooks like a hot knife through butter. In my first year at some no-name company, I was Employee of the Month 7 times. In 2 years, I was promoted to a leading position. The money flowed like wine. Things, however, took a turn. Call it ingenuity or desperation. Either way, humanity's brightest minds somehow found a way to not just extend a person's life, but to stop it from ending entirely. I still remember everyone's face in the office when the boss delivered the news. At this point, you're probably thinking, if the serum is so expensive, why not just continue pushing life insurance on the people that can't afford it? And that's a good question. The answer is that we could have, if anyone in the office actually stuck around. It was a feeding frenzy when production started en masse. The lines were long, and those who were turned away made it a point to criticize how classist the whole situation was. I agreed, but I also didn't care. In my mind, I pulled myself out of the muck. If others couldn't do it, then the consequences of failure were on them. Surprisingly, though, I saw even the rich being turned away sometimes. I didn't understand why, they obviously had the money for it, but when I hit the front of the line and it was my turn to pay my way into eternal life, I learned. I was incompatible. Paying for the serum was the first part of the process. You had to prove your status and establish that you had a solid source of income. Additionally, they factored in your credit scores. This was something I learned about when I first started off as an insurance agent, the whole credit system. Personally, I think the whole thing was a sham, but if it made it less of a hassle to actually buy the good shit in life, then whatever. After they ran background checks on your status and had all the information they needed to ensure you had the means to pay for the serum, the second part of the process was a blood test. My assumption, at first, was that you needed a clean bill of health in order to qualify, but the questions I expected to answer never came. Do you or have you ever consumed alcohol, nicotine, or other illicit substances? No. Do you or anyone in your family have a history of heart disease? No. Do you or anyone in your family have a history of mental health impairments? Well, no. They just stuck a needle in my arm, drew a vial of blood, and told me to wait. When the results came back, I was stunned. They didn't explain anything about why I was refused the serum. Their only response was that I was incompatible. As more and more people were starting to get the serum, the news cycles changed. For a while, it was a lot of anarchy and chaos. There were live feeds from circling helicopters that showed those injected with the serum trying anything and everything to kill themselves, only for them to rise unharmed. Politics started to return, with opponents to immortality decrying the immortal people who held positions of power. Eventually, wars began to break out. As far as I can recall, they're still ongoing decades later because the ones fighting the wars don't, or can't, die. But something even more interesting was starting to get coverage. Someone was anonymously sending videos to a local news station. Though they'd only a few seconds before pushing on with other news, what I heard kind of clicked things into place. The reason I ended up being rejected wasn't because I was unhealthy. It was my blood type. My blood type was AB, one of the rarest. If I donated, it would have been used only for those who also had my blood type, but if I needed blood, I could have received blood from anyone. I was lucky in that I never needed a transfusion, though pushing people to buy life insurance once led to a close call. As it turned out, people with type AB blood weren't allowed to receive the serum. They were deemed incompatible, but never really told why. With the number of people immortalized increasing, I started cultivating this internal fear of being left behind. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live more than anything, and so I started hatching a plan. Through casual conversation, I started building a list of people who weren't type AB and who also had absolutely no chance of ever affording the serum. I'd sweet talk them into a potential deal: give me a pack of your blood, and I'll share the serum with you. A lot of people flat out refused, fewer still wanted money on top of the serum, and only one was willing to part with their blood for free. Her name was Miranda Proctor. We grew up in the same area together and I'd always see her playing during recess. I never attended school officially, so we usually chatted through a chain-link fence during her lunch. She'd ask me about how things were going with my dad, and I'd ask about how much she enjoyed school. When we became teenagers, the dynamic changed and we made a couple mistakes. There was a romance for a little bit, but it fizzled out. Luckily, we remained friends. Miranda's father was sick. Her family was never really well off, earning just enough to be called lower middle class. There was no way in hell they'd be able to afford the immortality serum, let alone anything to cure her father's illness, but I ended up learning that her father, like me, had type AB blood. I made a deal: Miranda allows me to use her blood to falsify the results of the blood test, and after I receive the serum, I donate my blood to save her father. She didn't even hesitate to agree. If there was anything about the ones conducting the test for the serum, it's that they weren't consistent, or vigilant in any regard. The one that was supposed to draw my blood left the room before they could, their extraction gun still on the table, so while they were gone, I used it to pull Miranda's blood from the pack she gave to me and mark myself to make it look like I decided to take the initiative and draw my own blood. They weren't happy about it, something about safety protocols and all, but they didn't question that the blood wasn't mine. They should have. That night, I found myself in Miranda's house, hooked up to a cycler that would exchange small amounts of blood with that of her father. An hour prior, I remember injecting the serum into myself. I didn't remember much from the time in between, but I did remember not feeling well. When the exchange was done, Miranda looked so happy. We hugged. She kissed me, and it felt like old times. The last time I heard from her was when I tried checking my voicemail in the middle of the night after I left. It was a blood-curdling scream, and the feeling I experienced was nothing short of piercing cold. I could barely move and I was sweating profusely. As I struggled to stand, I could hear the news blaring across the room from the television. There was a massacre at someone's house. Only one person survived, and when they showed the blurriest, motion-warped photo on the screen, the only detail I could make out was their face. Miranda's father was changed and, soon, I will be too. The serum has adverse effects on those with type AB blood. If you're listening to this right now and this applies to you, please, whatever you do, die with dignity. Let go of your fears and just live in the moment. Surround yourself with the people that matter and realize that life is finite for a reason. You lose the ability to appreciate the little things when you have too much time. And if you see me, run. I fear that I am unkillable.